guys, this is Meredith from the Witty Paper Company, and today I just wanted to talk about picking out and caring for watercolor brushes. So the first thing we're going to talk about is some of the different strokes you can make with some common types of watercolor brushes. So I've laid out 10 of my most used here. So let's start right at the top. This is a liner brush, or some people call it a rigger brush. And this brush is really great for painting branches or other sort of nature-esque things. And you can see some of the different strokes it can make here. One is really thin and precise, and one's kind of bendy and all over the place. So since it likes to bend, it's so long it likes to bend while you're painting with it, it's great for making sort of organic, irregular shapes. So that's a great tool. This one is a fan brush. And you can see here, it's basically only good for one stroke, but it's a very cool look. And I don't use it very often, but I love the effect. So that's a fan brush. Here is a pretty common one. This one is a flat wash or a square wash. And I really use it for covering big areas of space. It's a good covering brush, and it's got a good clean square tip. So it's a good one too. This is a round brush. This is a number 14 round brush. This is pretty big, and this is basically just, big strokes, filling in areas. Mine pulls to a pretty precise tip, so you could do precise work with it too if you wanted to. And if you can see here, these two strokes, they look really similar, but they were actually made by two different brushes, one with the 14 round and the other with this brush. And this is a round wash brush. So the tip is actually sort of scalloped. And the reason you would want both of them and not just one or the other is because the scallop brush is so much better for doing precise scalloped patterns. And you could do it with a round brush, but it would take you a lot longer and it just wouldn't be as precise. So this brush has made these two strokes. Now we come to my absolute favorite brush. I use this all the time. You probably can't find a single painting I've done that I didn't use this for some part of it. It's the number 8 round brush. And these are two of the strokes I've made with it. So you can do tiny work, or you can do wide work. I really love it. I use it all the time. This is a small square-tipped brush. So same sort of thing, precise, clean, square strokes. And this is an even smaller version with even smaller tip. So this one I love for lettering and just really straight lines. And last but not least is the detail brush. Now this one has a very tiny tip. I think this is a number 0. Yeah, this is a 0 detail brush, or a round brush, or just a really tiny round brush. And I think they also make like 00 and 000, so you can get really tiny. And this is awesome for very precise work. You can see here I've lettered the word ultramarine with this brush, and I've just done a really straight line. And these kind of look like waves. It's just good for very tiny work, and it's very controlled, unlike the liner brush, which is quite a bit more unpredictable. So those are probably my 10 most used brushes. The next thing we'll talk about is my favorite brands. So I've got to say that most of my brushes are kind of overwhelmingly the Princeton brand, sort of different lines of the Princeton brand, but the Princeton brand, like, let's see. This one is, these two are Princeton brand Neptune collection. These two are Princeton brand. This was a cheaper collection. Princeton Art and Brush Co. It doesn't say which collection. This one is not Princeton. This one's a white sable brush. So I've had only good luck with that. All of my brushes are synthetic, just in case you're wondering. This one, Princeton Art, Princeton Art. These two are Winsor & Newton brushes. And I love them as well, but they're quite a bit more expensive. So I don't have too many brushes made by them, but I do have a few. Here's what I tell you. If you're a beginner, you should not run out and just buy a bunch of super expensive brushes. There are really only a few that you need number 8 round being one of them. And the Princeton brand is really great and sort of middle of the road. Like, they're expensive, but they're not super expensive. The Winsor & Newton one, like, this is my most expensive brush out of this pile. This one had to be like $25, $27. This one's very expensive for a brush. And then my liner brush here was probably $5. So there's quite a bit of price variance. So I would really just say try out the ones you like. I definitely recommend the Princeton brand. Like I said, you know, Winsor & Newton's great, White Sable's great, but Princeton has more of a range of prices. And so I really like that about them. I like that I can find brushes for different prices depending on what I am looking for. Definitely invest your money in the brushes you're going to use the most. So, like, it's worth it to buy a $20 number 8 round. At least it would be to me because I use it so much. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is the care of your brushes. Now, you don't want to go and spend a ton of money or even a decent amount of money on some nice brushes and not be able to use them for very long. You want to extend their longevity as much as possible. So it's very important to store watercolor brushes in a box like this. So if you notice the 3 holes here, they're for ventilation. You see, watercolor brushes are designed to hold a ton of water. Like this brush, for example, I mean, even if I squeeze all the water out of it, it'll still be wet for probably 24 hours. I mean, they just hold onto the water for dear life. That's what they're designed to do. That being said, you can't just throw them in an airtight container. They can get moldy, the brushes can get discolored, the metal barrel can rust. You cannot throw them in unventilated. Now, if you don't want to invest in a box like this, you can just, throw them in any container, just don't close it until you're sure they're dry. So that's important to note. I love this thing. So, very good thing to remember. Do not just throw them into an airtight container. And let's see, the last thing we'll talk about is actually picking your brushes at the store. So I think this can be really hard hard and overwhelming because there are usually, if you're at a fine art store, there are rows or aisles of brushes and, sometimes of just watercolor brushes. So it's definitely important to choose the right ones and not get overwhelmed by the process. So when I was picking out my brushes, and when I pick out my brushes, I really like to have this paper. Let me show you what it does. A lot of art stores will let you try this on paper like this. If you look, see, it gets dark and then it'll fade away. And the reason this is just so useful is picking a brush, to me, has always just been about how it feels in my hand. Like, I don't just go by brands or even just by price. To me, it's really about how does it feel in my hand? Do I like the way it's bending? Do I like the resistance it has? Is it too soft? Is it too long? Any of those things. And the only way to really figure it out is obviously testing them back and forth on your hand to feel resistance and then doing something like this. Now, I realize not all of you will have a little board like this, so make sure you ask your fine art store if they have something. I don't know the technical name for it, but most of them do. So this is just absolutely great. Feel very carefully how it is in your hand. That's the only way you'll be happy with it. Definitely don't just buy for a brand name, or even if you're on a budget, spend where you're going to use your brushes the most. So this is definitely great to have. And the only way to know if you really like it or not. All right, so thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to our channel if you like what you've seen so far. I'll have a few other videos about paints and paper coming soon. So thanks again for watching, guys, and happy painting.